The broadcast did not begin with anger. It began with procedure. Across hundreds of systems, the same message unfolded in precise, measured tones, translated instantly into every known language. The words carried no emotion, no urgency, only authority. A declaration issued by the Galactic Alliance, citing violations of territorial purity laws. A newly established human settlement had crossed into restricted space. The infraction was logged, confirmed, and categorized. Enforcement was authorized. No warning was required. On the edge of map space, far from major trade lanes and diplomatic corridors, the colony orbited a dim, unremarkable star. It was small, barely more than a scattering of habitats anchored to a partially terraformed world. Its infrastructure was modest, its defenses almost non-existent. To the Alliance, it barely qualified as a target. To humanity, it was one of many quiet expansions into the unknown. To the fleet that arrived, it was routine. They emerged without fanfare. No dramatic formations, no prolonged standoff. Just silent arrivals slipping into orbit with overwhelming superiority. Their vessels dwarfed anything the colony possessed, angular silhouettes blotting out starlight as they took position. Targeting grids locked in place within seconds. There was no attempt to communicate. No demand for surrender. The first strike came from orbit. Energy lances pierced the atmosphere with surgical precision, igniting entire sectors in controlled waves of destruction. Habitat domes collapsed inward, their structural integrity failing instantly under the focused bombardment. Power grids overloaded, cascading failures rippling through every system. Within moments, the colony's surface became a network of expanding firestorms, each one calculated, each one final. There was no resistance. No defensive fleet rose to meet them. No countermeasures activated. Even the emergency channels remained eerily quiet. The colony did not beg. It did not bargain. It simply endured the assault in silence as its existence was erased layer by layer. From orbit, the Alliance commanders observed the operation with detached efficiency. Every metric aligned with expectation. Target neutralization progressed ahead of schedule. Civilian presence was irrelevant. Strategic value was non-existent. The action was logged as complete before the last structures had fully collapsed into ash. And yet, something lingered. A detail so small it almost escaped notice. The colony's data network remained active far longer than projected. Even as its systems failed, even as its surface burned, the uplinks continued to transmit. Not distress signals. Not pleas for aid. Just raw data, continuous, uninterrupted streams documenting every second of the attack. The feeds did not cut out when the first habitats fell. They did not falter as atmospheric ignition consumed entire regions. They persisted, recording angles, energy signatures, fleet positions. Watching. By the time the final strike rendered the planet uninhabitable, the transmissions ceased. Not abruptly. Not violently. They ended with precision, clean, deliberate, as if someone had chosen the exact moment to stop. The Alliance logged the anomaly but assigned it no significance. Primitive species often behaved unpredictably under extinction-level pressure. It was noted, archived, and dismissed. In the aftermath, the system returned to silence. No reinforcements arrived. No retaliatory fleets appeared on the edges of sensor range. Human space, as far as the Alliance could observe, remained unchanged. Trade routes continued. Communications persisted. There was no surge of military activity, no escalation of alerts. To the Alliance, this confirmed their assumption. Humanity lacked the capacity to respond. The destruction of the colony had achieved its purpose. A boundary had been enforced. A message had been delivered. Elsewhere, across the network of galactic communication channels, the incident barely registered. A minor enforcement action. A negligible species corrected before it could become a problem. Discussions moved on within hours, shifting focus to more relevant matters: politics, trade disputes, internal conflicts among established powers. The absence of a response became its own conclusion. But far beyond the reach of Alliance sensors, in regions deliberately left uncharted, something shifted. Not visibly. Not dramatically. There were no sudden explosions of activity, no fleets surging into motion. What changed was quieter than that. Signals moved through channels that did not officially exist. Systems long considered dormant acknowledged commands buried deep within their architecture. Coordinates updated. Locks disengaged. And at the exact moment the colony's final transmission ended, a single directive propagated outward with perfect clarity. It did not carry rage. It did not carry grief. Only confirmation. The trigger condition had been met. For a time, nothing followed. Across the monitored regions of human space, traffic patterns remained unchanged. Civilian vessels continued their routes. Trade relays transmitted as scheduled. No surge in encrypted military chatter, no emergency mobilizations, no visible shift in posture. To external observers, humanity's silence hardened into confirmation. They had absorbed the loss and chosen not to escalate. Within Alliance circles, the incident faded quickly. Analysts filed their reports, each concluding the same thing: the species lacked cohesion. Their expansion had been reckless, their response non-existent. A minor correction had been applied, and the outcome aligned with predictive models. There would be no retaliation. Then the first anomaly appeared. It wasn't a fleet, or a weapon, or even a transmission directed at anyone in particular. It was a pattern, an irregular pulse detected simultaneously at the far edges of multiple sensor arrays. Faint, structured, and impossibly synchronized across distances that should have made coordination unfeasible. At first, it was dismissed as background interference, a statistical coincidence amplified by overlapping scans. But it repeated. The pulse carried no recognizable data, no language, no signature belonging to any known civilization. Yet its structure was deliberate, layered encryption nested within itself, shifting with each iteration. Attempts to isolate it only revealed deeper complexity, as if the signal was not meant to be read, only acknowledged. Within hours, the pattern spread. Not outward but everywhere at once. Remote listening posts, deep space observatories, even classified Alliance installations began registering the same phenomenon. Always faint. Always precise. Always synchronized down to the smallest measurable fraction of time. Something had been activated. Beyond map space, in regions marked as empty or unstable, systems long written off as inert began to respond. Power signatures flickered into existence where none had been recorded for decades. Gravitational distortions formed and collapsed with controlled regularity. Asteroid clusters shifted, revealing structures embedded within them, vast frameworks concealed beneath layers of rock and debris. They had always been there. Hidden shipyards, constructed in silence and masked against detection, came online without hesitation. Their systems did not boot like abandoned relics. They resumed, as if continuing a process that had never truly stopped. Assembly lines extended, docking arms repositioned, and sealed chambers opened to expose hulls that had been waiting in perfect preservation. Elsewhere, in the shadow of a collapsed star, a fleet powered up. Not with the chaotic surge of an emergency launch, but with measured precision. Reactors stabilized instantly. Navigation systems aligned without recalibration. Vessels disengaged from their holding positions one by one, forming structured formations before any external command could be detected. They had already received it. The scale began to reveal itself slowly, almost reluctantly, as if the systems themselves were limiting exposure. Individual detections were dismissed at first, isolated readings that could not be verified. A cluster of unknown ships here. A sudden energy spike there. Nothing conclusive. Until the numbers stopped making sense. Reports from different sectors started to overlap. Independent confirmations, each describing similar signatures, massive warships, identical in configuration, appearing in locations too distant to be connected. Cross-referencing the data only deepened the inconsistency. The formations were not scattered. They were coordinated across vast distances with impossible timing. Then came the first accurate count. It wasn't released publicly. It wasn't even shared across all Alliance command tiers. The number circulated in restricted channels, flagged for verification, then rechecked again and again as new data streams arrived. The margin of error vanished. 500,000. Not projections. Not theoretical capacity. Active vessels, confirmed through multiple sensor networks, each one matching the mass and output profile of a Dreadnought-class warship. Not hastily assembled constructs, but fully realized designs, uniform, deliberate, and far beyond the scale of anything the Alliance had catalogued. They had not been built in response to the colony's destruction. They had been waiting. The realization fractured earlier assumptions with brutal clarity. This was not a species reacting to loss. This was a system executing a condition long prepared for, one that required no debate, no delay, no visible escalation until the exact moment it was needed. And still, humanity remained silent. No declarations. No warnings. No attempts to justify what was unfolding. The signal continued to propagate, threading through space like an unseen framework, linking shipyards to fleets, fleets to command structures that could not be located. Every movement followed it. Every activation aligned with it. Whatever had been triggered at the moment the colony fell, it was not an emotional response. It was a protocol, precise, controlled, and already nearing completion before anyone realized it had begun. The first confirmed contact did not resemble a battle. Alliance defense grids had already shifted to maximum readiness. Perimeter fleets formed layered formations around key systems, weapons primed, targeting solutions cycling through every known engagement scenario. Command expected a surge, a direct retaliation driven by numbers alone. 500,000 dreadnoughts should have moved like a storm. They did not. Human fleets arrived with exact spacing, holding positions just beyond optimal firing range. No aggressive maneuvers. No probing attacks. They simply aligned, each vessel locking into place as if part of a structure too large to perceive in full. Across multiple systems, the same pattern repeated, perfect symmetry, perfect timing. Then one ship moved. A single dreadnought advanced toward an outer defense formation, its trajectory clean, unhurried. Alliance targeting systems tracked it instantly. Firing solutions resolved in fractions of a second. Authorization was granted without hesitation. The barrage that followed should have erased it. Instead, the space around the vessel distorted. Not visibly at first. Sensors registered the shift before the eye could confirm it, energy dispersal patterns bending, trajectories collapsing inward and vanishing against an unseen boundary. Every shot reached its target. None of them connected. The dreadnought did not return fire. It continued forward until it reached a precise distance, then stopped. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then the entire defense formation lost cohesion. Not destroyed. Not exploded. Disabled. Systems across dozens of ships shut down simultaneously. Weapons powered off. Navigation froze. Even internal communications failed, leaving crews isolated inside vessels that no longer responded to command inputs. No damage signatures. No residual energy spikes. Just silence, imposed with absolute precision. The human ship withdrew. No follow-up strike. No attempt to capitalize on the opening. It returned to formation as if the interaction had served its purpose. Across the network, similar events began to unfold. A fortified outpost guarding a major transit corridor registered a brief fluctuation in local space-time metrics. Its defensive lattice, considered impenetrable, collapsed inward, its structure unraveling at the molecular level without any identifiable external force. The station remained intact, but every system within it ceased functioning at once. In another sector, an entire patrol fleet found itself unable to move, its vessels locked in place by a force that did not register as gravitational, electromagnetic, or anything within known classifications. Attempts to override the effect failed. Attempts to understand it yielded nothing. Every encounter followed the same pattern. Engagement without aggression. Overwhelming capability applied with minimal output. No casualties unless resistance escalated beyond a specific threshold, and even then, the response remained controlled, contained, measured. Panic began to replace strategy. Alliance command cycles struggled to adapt. Traditional doctrines failed to apply. There was no clear objective to counter, no predictable escalation curve. The human fleets were not behaving like an invading force. They were positioning, interacting, withdrawing, each action precise, each outcome final. Then the intercepts came through. At first, they were dismissed as fabrication. The encryption was unlike anything previously encountered, layered and dynamic, but fragments began to resolve as more data was captured. Not full transmissions, just pieces. Enough to reconstruct intent. There were no references to enemies. No tactical language describing targets or victories. Only phases. Phase 1 active. Engagement parameters within expected range. Response variables recorded. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Human fleets were not engaging in war. They were running a process. Every encounter, every disabled system, every measured application of force fed into something larger. Data flowed back through the same network that had carried the original signal, compiling outcomes across multiple systems in real time. They were studying reactions, testing thresholds, measuring coordination speeds, observing how different species responded under pressure, how command structures adapted or fractured when faced with controlled, overwhelming superiority. The scale of it redefined the situation instantly. The Alliance had prepared for retaliation. For conquest. Even for annihilation. They had not prepared to become subjects. Across command networks, a realization began to take hold, slow at first, then undeniable. The destruction of the human colony had not triggered a war. It had initiated an evaluation. And every action taken in response was being recorded, analyzed, and used to determine what came next. The explanation surfaced where no one expected it, inside the fragments of their own intercepted data. As analysts forced deeper decryption passes on captured transmissions, patterns began to align with archived human linguistic structures. Not their public dialects, but older command frameworks, formats used for internal directives, stripped of ornament and reduced to pure intent. What emerged was not a message meant for the Alliance. It was a record. Entries mapped precisely to the moment the colony had been destroyed. Timestamps matched down to the last fraction of a second. Sensor data, energy signatures, fleet positions, all mirrored what the Alliance itself had recorded. But layered over it was something else, classification tags, pre-written, waiting to be confirmed. Trigger event, verified. Hostile intent, confirmed. Protocol authorization, complete. The colony had not been an accident of expansion. It had been placed, deliberately, quietly, without announcement, just beyond a boundary the Alliance enforced with absolute certainty. Every variable had been accounted for: response time, escalation likelihood, weapon yield. Even the absence of warning had been predicted. The silence during the attack was no longer a mystery. The colony had been instructed not to resist. Its purpose had never been survival. It had been observation, an instrument designed to capture the first unambiguous act of aggression against humanity by an external power. Not a border dispute. Not a miscommunication. Something clear, undeniable, impossible to reinterpret. A justification. Further decryption exposed the layer beneath. Human governance structures had long been divided on a single question: how to engage a galaxy filled with unknown variables. Expansion had continued cautiously, while contingencies were developed in parallel, fail-safes for scenarios that could not be negotiated, only answered. Those contingencies required consensus. Consensus required proof. The destruction of the colony provided it. Every governing body, every military command, every autonomous system aligned instantly once the data was verified. There were no debates. No delays. The protocol did not ask what should be done. It confirmed that the conditions had already been met. What followed was never a decision. It was execution. The Dreadnought fleets were only the visible layer. Their deployment had been calculated not for efficiency, but for clarity, an unmistakable display of scale, controlled down to the smallest interaction. Enough to dominate. Not enough to reveal everything. Because the process was not finished. Within the same recovered logs, new entries had begun to appear. Phase 1 complete. Behavioral instability increasing. Cooperative potential undetermined. The Alliance's internal communications, panic signals, conflicting orders, fractures between member species, had been catalogued in real time. Patterns of fear, aggression, and collapse were mapped against predictive models that updated continuously as new data arrived. Humanity was not deciding how to end the conflict. They were deciding what the conflict meant. Attempts to initiate negotiation finally received a response. Not through traditional channels, not directed at any single authority, but broadcast across every frequency the Alliance could access. It carried no hostility, no urgency, only the same procedural tone that had begun everything. Acknowledgement of contact. Confirmation of received signals. Statement of current status. You are under evaluation. Nothing followed. No demands. No terms. Just that. In the absence of further explanation, the weight of the words settled across every command structure that heard them. The implication was absolute. The outcome had not been chosen yet. It was being determined, shaped by every reaction, every decision made under pressure. And for the first time, the Alliance understood the imbalance. They had believed themselves enforcers of order, arbiters of law in a stable, predictable system. The destruction of a minor colony had been routine, a correction applied without consequence. But the species they had corrected did not operate within those assumptions. Humans had not rushed to war. They had not lashed out in grief or anger. They had waited, prepared, and when the moment came, they had acted with a level of control that removed chance from the equation entirely. The colony had been a question. The galaxy's response had become the answer. Now the roles were reversed. Across the systems held in silent containment by 500,000 dreadnoughts, every movement was observed, every signal recorded. Not to determine victory or defeat, but to decide something far more final. Whether the civilizations that burned a single world were capable of existing in the same future as the ones who had let it burn.